Hello and welcome to Oversight. I am Charles Emuze. Did you know in 2019 that there were over 200 members of the lower chamber and 64 members of the upper chamber got newly elected into the 9th Assembly? What does this mean for all the constituency projects nominated by their predecessors? Are we talking about another waste of public funds? We speak of projects worth about ₦1 billion. On today's episode of Oversight, we go to Odo-Ekiti in Gbonyin local government area of Ekiti State to track a constituency project initiated in 2019 and has since been abandoned. As is our style, this is what you should know about Ekiti State.
Ekiti is a state in southwestern Nigeria created in October 1996. Its capital is Odo-Ekiti. Ekiti borders Ondo State to the south. It is located south of Kwara and Kogi State and east of Ogun State. Ekiti lies on an area underlain by metamorphic rock. Ekiti is buoyant in agricultural resources, with cocoa as a leading cash crop. Others include oil palm, kola nut, cashew, and plantain. It has 16 local government areas and 3 senatorial districts, namely Ekiti North, Ekiti South, and Ekiti Central. Ekiti State has 6 members in the House of Representatives and 3 senators. In 2021, Ekiti State received a total allocation of 1.93 billion naira from zonal intervention projects known as constituency projects. Odo-Ekiti is a community in Gbonyin local government area of the state. It is located about 45 kilometers from Odo-Ekiti, the state capital, and populated with about 20,000 residents. The people of Odo-Ekiti are faced with infrastructural challenges for railway roads and power supply.
During rainy season, nobody, no vehicle, no Okada rider can pass through this place because this red granite have been in red mode that they put now. It used to be slippery. If they can help us put it in a normal like asphalt condition, we will be very happy.
We start this contract on the 2018 budget, which come from Honorable Odo-Ekiti. But when we start this budget, I saw the price of the budget is 23 million naira. But when we start the road, we say we never finish them. Just use a 6 inches block. So you use this block. So we are seeing this thing no good.
In 2018, 23 million naira was allocated for asphalt laying of Boluwatife Hospital Road, Odo-Ekiti. This project was to span 673 meters from Odo-Ekiti to Main Market. Still in 2018, another 13.6 million naira was allocated for the construction of Township Road and drainage from St. Mary's Anglican Church, Odo-Ekiti to Main Market. We visited the site and this is what we found.
Nǹkan tá a mọ̀ nípa ẹ̀ ni pé aṣojú wa ní ilé aṣòfin ní Abuja ló wá síbí about 1.5 years ago, around July, August 2019. So ló wá síbí. So ọ̀nà fẹ́ ṣe ọ̀nà yìí láti ọ̀nà àgbàdo, ọ̀nà kan wà lọ́nà àgbàdo tó gba ilé Honorable yẹn kọjá, wọ́n máa ṣe pẹ̀lú ilé. Ìgbà tó dé máa ṣe ó ní wọ́n máa tie, that was what he told us. Àárí caterpillar ń bí wọ́n kàn ṣe àwọn gba labour. Àti ń complain náà a lọ sí council pé kàn bá gbọ́ wọn ní kì í ṣe torí wọn lágbára àti ṣe pé ẹni tó ṣe kó tẹ̀ wá wo fúnra rẹ̀ bó ṣe rí àárí.
Both projects were facilitated by Honorable Akin Awodumila. He represented Odo-Ekiti from 2015 till 2019. Both projects got a total allocation of 36.6 million naira. From what you see on the ground, do you think it was a waste of public funds? Speaking of abandoned project, we noticed another one in Odo-Ekiti that requires attention. It is the installation of 200 kVA transformer by the Rural Electrification Agency. The project was captured in 2019 budget for 7.5 million naira. As of today, it is not serving its intended purpose and lies fallow.
This transformer was installed around 2020, January or thereabout, just to complement the efforts of the transformer in the community here. Before now, the community here are sharing electricity from the transformer attached to it from Ilupepa community transformer to ensure that we have fuel load on the other Ilupepa. This one was to complement the effort of the transformer there. But to inform the BDC officials that we have a new transformer here, they said they were never informed about the installation of this one until then. They cannot connect it. That is the latest, that's the little information I have about this.
Oversight contacted a representative of the Benin Electricity Distribution Company in Ekiti State about the electricity issues. Mr. Kayode Brown is the public relations personnel of BEDC. This is what he told us.
BEDC have a procedure to getting a transformer energized. In the first place, I do not believe, or I don't think the project is that of BEDC. That's number one thing. And if a community, have such projects, then they will have to follow the procedure to get it energized. And what is this procedure? They have to first and foremost write to BEDC, informing BEDC. They ought to have even done that even before the construction is done. They have to take permission to construct. After the construction is completed, they will also write via the contractor to inform the BEDC, and then the BEDC will come right there to come and test the functionality of such a transformer before it is energized. Because you see, basically, transformer does not generate electricity; it's just a distributing, equipment. So, in other words, the BEDC ought to have been carried along to proper advice whether what they need in that area is a relief transformer, because I do not know whether the existing transformer there is overloaded or not. So I do not understand the reason why the two transformer has to be constructed, given the fact that Odo-Ekiti has supply and they are being metered by the transformer, and they have a bulk prepayment meter, which means if they buy energy, they will have supply. So I'm not aware of these other two transformers, and I don't think they have brought that to the notice of BEDC at all. The community happened to be, where the present Commissioner for Public Utilities and Infrastructure in Ekiti State hails from. In other words, the community have an unhindered access to BEDC. Okay? And again, if these transformers are installed by the federal government through the Rural Electrification Agency, it means that the agency ought to have written to BEDC informing, because these constructions are done on the network of BEDC. And it is important that you tell the owners of this network that you take them in confidence that you are having such projects within their network. Because you know too very well that the moment you complete the project, it is the BEDC that is supposed to energize it and is supposed to take delivery of such projects, because they are the one who will put potential on this transformer for the community that to now begin to enjoy it. In the first place, such project will not be completed without it properly metered, so that you can account for the quantum of energy that passes through such a project. So I will want to say that even if the BEDC is not taken in confidence before the commencement of such a project, then at least the Commissioner for Infrastructure and Public Utilities in the state, who happen to be an indigene of the same community, should have, properly advised the community on the ways to go in order to get such projects commissioned and energized by BDC.
Odo-Ekiti is now represented by Honorable Bamishile Richard. We spoke with him to get a commitment to complete these projects, and this is what he told us.
When it comes to projects that were nominated by lawmakers in their constituencies, there are projects that are funded by government. Either we get the full funding or we don't from the budget. Is subject to allocation of funds in every year, budgetary allocations. So for me, I really am not sure if those funds or the allocation for those monies were available for the projects to be done. So it falls in between two categories. It's either the funds were released and the jobs were not done, or the funds were not released probably in sufficiency of funds for the budget. So these things are things we need to find out. Now that you have brought this to my notice, this is my immediate constituency. I can assure you that we will look keenly into this and find out why these projects are abandoned. But like I said, it could be abandoned on two reasons. It could be a deficiency of the lawmaker that represent my predecessor, or it could just be that the funds were not adequately released. Because there are times you are funded 100%, there are times you are funded 50%. For instance, in my case now, all the projects that I have in the constituency for last year, I don't have an excuse for those projects not to be done because we were funded 100%. So there is no project that you would come to my constituency that were in the budget, were not done in the time, in last year, 2020. But like I said, we'll look keenly into it. I'm very interested in it because it's a constituency and it's the people's money and we represent the people. The purposes of coming to the National Assembly is by representation and making good laws for the good governance of people in this country, particularly in my constituency that I represent. And if you find things like this happening, it is absurd, and we say it all the time. Most of the problems we have in that community, as I said to you, is electrification crisis. Even when we strive to bring solars, we strive to bring transformers and all that, it is for BEDC, that is that overriding authority over this, to make sure these things are done. But you see, they make it clear to us that it's been privatized now, that it's no more under the hands of the federal government. And that's the unfortunate part of it. They make it clear to us now that they're there for business and to make money. And if you look at those rural areas, the question is, where do you have big companies that could fund or pay off what is expected from BEDC? These are the problems that we're facing. But irrespective of whatever, we're still a citizen that make up that enclave Nigeria. It does not matter. Even if we don't have, small communities should even benefit from the system as we go. Because it is the same vote that Lagos State pulls, or a place like Ikeja pulls out. It's the same vote that comes out of my local government, Ekiti East, no more. People live there. So some shouldn't be getting benefits while others don't. So this is where I strongly and would continue with the time that we have, with the last vein of our blood, the blood in our veins, to make sure that these things are put for our people. As I speak with you, my local government does not have electricity, like I said, for 7 years. And this is absurd. We fight this on a daily basis. And we will continue to fight it until we get it. But it is the issue of BEDC strongly. This has nothing to do with the federal government because the electrification issues in this country have been privatized now. So the people in charge are the ones who are playing cat and mouse game with us. But I want to tell you, with all these information that are being put in front of us now, we would go into that 200 kVA transformer that you said has not been energized as we speak. You know, the issues again are, even as a lawmaker, if I decide to put a 200, 500 kVA transformer in a particular location, I cannot connect it myself. We still have to go back to BEDC. They will charge us exorbitant amount of funds to get these things connected because they will tell you pay as close as 2 to 2.5 million, 3 million in some cases. And even when you do these things, if we are not locked to the creed, it's still a bloody waste of time. So you could have all the transformers in the world, But if you're not connected to the national grid, what does it transform? How does it generate electricity for the people? So it's a bottleneck that we need to, as a people, to understand and get to understand and make sure we resolve. But this is where we are, and this is why we are here, to make sure these things work.
This project in Odo-Ekiti re-emphasizes the need for a review of the execution of constituency projects, especially within election years, and the significance of ensuring continuity of project when there is a change of baton between legislators.
We'll take a short break, and when we return, Iniobong Usen of Budget gives us an overview of Nigeria's debt profile and the 2021 budget. Please stay with us.
Going by the recent release of the 2020 full year implementation report, the government was only able to realize about 3.42 trillion naira out of the projected 7.58 trillion naira. Also, one of the key highlights of that particular finding was that we discovered that about 316 projects were duplicated across about 73 MDAs. And the total value of those capital projects put together was summed up to about 35 billion naira. Also, that particular report highlighted the fact that over the last 6 to 7 years, this present administration has allocated over 10 trillion naira to security. And we asked for proper security audit so that Nigerians can get proper value for money, especially as it regards security spending. And this is very important because a lot of the funds that are supposed to accrue to the MDAs that carry out projects that are security related crowd out, much needed resources in other critical sectors of the Nigerian economy. It's all the more worrisome when we are faced with the fact that the chunk of our expenditure is financed by borrowing. So in that same 2020, of the 3.4 trillion naira that was that the government realized as revenue, 98% of that sum was used for debt servicing, meaning that virtually almost all the funds that the government had to carry out its recurrent expenditure, which were non-debt in nature, and capital expenditure were borrowed. So that begs the question of how has the government utilized these cash resources over a period of time. So basically, these were some of the key areas that report looked into and addressed. In 2020, the federal government exceeded its borrowing limit from the CBN, especially through the ways and means method. The CBN Act allows the federal government to only borrow about 5% of the previous year's realized revenue. But in that particular year, the federal government borrowed about 62% of the previous year's revenue. Also, one of the reasons why it's quite worrisome that we have this excessive domestic borrowing is that when the government enters the domestic capital markets to borrow, it crowds out private borrowing by other sources. And what does that do? It puts pressure on the lending rates, which makes it all the more difficult for private sector players to access much needed finance to grow their businesses, which would eventually stimulate the economy and grow the country's GDP. I know that there's usually the argument around the debt being within sustainable levels because the country's current debt to GDP ratio is below the threshold advised by the World Bank and the IMF. But you don't pay debt with GDP, you pay debt with revenue. So if you're in a revenue crisis and you now even have to borrow to service your debt, it stands logic on the head that the primary source of financing budgets in that very dire situation would be going back also into the debt market, especially when you have some other viable options for actually financing your budget deficits. It's very worrisome that, you know, we continue to look at borrowing as the only option for financing budget deficits. Also, if you look at some of the areas of the economy that the government seeks to borrow to spend on, it gives you much to desire as regards how the government intends to pay back these loans. Because primarily these loans are supposed to be spent in areas that would spur growth and development in the economy, spur economic activities. So if you are borrowing $500 million, for instance, for power sector reform, that loan has actually been signed but hasn't been disbursed, and we are not getting value for money as it regards that particular loan, in terms of maybe increasing the generation capacity of Nigeria, the transmission capacity and distribution capacity, as the case may be. What value for money is Nigeria getting?
You just talked about borrowing to spur economic growth, so borrowing to ensure that such projects generate value for money. Do you think constituency projects fall within this category of projects that should be funded with borrowed money?
Let's look at the numbers first to actually do that particular analysis. So Nigeria's capex for last year implementation was about 1.6 trillion naira. If you take out the 97 billion naira that was allocated to for zonal intervention projects, that's just about 6.1% of the entire capex for 2020. And if you look at the implications for service delivery at the grassroots, it's you can make a case for those zonal intervention projects. But where the problem lies now, it's the kinds of projects that are implemented as zonal intervention projects and the quality of the projects. So if you are borrowing to carry out capital projects, I had already stated earlier that these should be projects that would stimulate the economy and, you know, create activities that would enable the government pay back this loan in maybe the short, medium, or long term. So if it's already evident that virtually all of the revenues realized by the government in 2020 was used to service debt, that clearly tells us that whatever expenditure that was made in that particular fiscal year was done with money that was borrowed. And so every borrowed kobo spent on a capital project should be a viable project. But what's the case we've had over time? I was just looking at the statistics for 2020 on some of the projects that our project tracking officers had tracked across all the federal constituencies, across all the states in the federation. And you will still find that a large number of projects are still either abandoned or have not been done, despite the fact that we've had feelers that in the 2020 fiscal year, the zonal intervention projects got 100% of the funds allocated to them. So why are we still faced with a situation where we still have abandoned projects or projects not being done, if those projects have been fully funded by the federal government? That's one side of the issue. The other side is that the quality of the projects need to be improved considerably, and also the types of projects. So seeing that we're already in a revenue crisis and every kobo that we invest should actually yield optimal or optimum dividends for Nigeria. These zonal intervention projects should be geared towards human capital development so that some of the beneficiaries of these projects can now contribute positively to the economy, pay taxes to the government, and help the government pay back some of these loans that were acquired to actually implement these projects in the first place. So the whole idea of zonal intervention projects is not bad in itself. Where the issue is with the execution of those projects, the quality of the projects executed, and the priority areas of those projects in question.
This is the much we can take on today's episode of the program. As is our style, we continue to ask you to play your part. Get involved and ask questions. Till I come your way again, I'm Charles Emuze. Thank you for watching.